So this is the Black Hack, which is a streamlined version of D&D by David Black. It's part of a growing movement in old school D&D circles to publish your personal D&D rules, and it's found a lot of success in that community. It was published via a very successful Kickstarter campaign, which I backed. One of the great things about it was how cheap it was. I got this, a second copy of it, a GM screen, a small adventure, and some character sheets, all for about £8. So that was a really great deal. The cover art is very simple and effective. It's very striking. It catches your eye, and it really evokes what this rule set is going for, which is kind of rebellious DIY attitude towards D&D. It harkens back to those original editions, first edition and 0th edition, where the focus was much more on the crazy ideas that the GM would come up with and less on exhaustive rules for every possible situation. That's what it really focuses on. The rules are mostly a roll under system. So you're focusing on rolling underneath your different ability scores. It has the same 6 ability scores as standard D&D. So it's compatible with other D&D stuff, but it goes strictly with roll under for success. And that keeps the core mechanic the same for everything. It also has a very modern procedure that I've seen in things like Apocalypse World and Dungeon World, where only the characters, only the players roll for anything that happened, right? All actions are rolled for by the players. If a monster tries to do something to the players, instead of the monster having to roll, the players roll to resist it. So it's all player focused in that sense. It also uses advantage and disadvantage, which is an old school rule that was popularized by 5th edition D&D. One major departure from standard D&D is the armor points, which is the armor system that this uses. Rather than making it harder to hit you like a normal D&D, it absorbs damage, which we've seen in games like Dungeon World. But what's unique about it is that you have a limited number of armor points based on the type of armor you're wearing. And once all of that damage has been absorbed, then the armor no longer works. It's no longer effective until you've rested, and then you get your armor points back. I'm a little skeptical about this method. I feel like unless you had tons and tons of armor, then for the most part, your armor is going to wear out really quickly and probably just a couple hits, and then you won't be effective anymore. Maybe a better solution could have been to have armor that always reduces damage, but just does, 1, 2, or 3 points. But it could work just fine. Let's see here. So initiative is an interesting thing. How it works is that when a fight starts up, you and your opponents, you and the monsters, I suppose. Well, no, the monsters don't roll, so it would just be the players. The players all roll, and you're trying to roll under your dexterity. And if you succeed, then you go before the monsters, and if you fail, you go after the monsters. So that's nice and simple and clean, but I'm not sure what the big advantage of this is over something like group initiative, which is what I usually use. And besides, after the first round or so, it will end up looking like group initiative anyway, won't it? Because the players' turns will always go back to back. In any case, that's how it works, and it's one of those things you could easily change if it wasn't your thing. Attacking and defending is a roll under system. So to attack with a melee weapon or to dodge a melee attack, you make a strength check. The same is true for dexterity and ranged weapons. If you're fighting a monster with more hit dice than your level, what you do is you add the difference to all rolls that you make involving them, which makes them harder to deal with, right? Because getting a higher roll is bad in this system. So you're fighting big monsters, you just add numbers to your dice, and they're harder to deal with. It's a simple solution. It's very elegant, but it does lack some of the granularity of dealing with monsters who might be strong but clumsy, for example. If you play the game as it is written, then higher hit dice monsters are just better in all stats, to an equal extent. Everything about them is better one step as they get more hit dice. It speeds up the game a lot, but you lose a little bit of the detail. Damage is strictly based on the class that you are or the monster hit dice, right? So the higher your hit dice, the more damage the monster is going to do. Though two-handed weapons do more damage. So really the only difference is whether you have a one or a two-handed weapon, which is fine with me. It's very simple, but I tend to like weapon systems like that. I don't like a ton of detail for my weapons as a personal preference. As something that's very common with old school games, I've seen this in more than one. It really varies, but this uses a death and dismemberment table when you get to 0 hit points instead of just dying. So there's a couple of things that can happen when you're taken out of action, as it's called in this game. And that just means when you're down to 0 hit points, you roll on this die and something will happen instead of strictly dying. So this makes it harder to die. It actually makes you tougher. But what it also means is that as the game goes on, your character is going to start accumulating crippling injuries and disfigurements. So your character is just going to turn into this wreck eventually that is have no choice but to retire because they're just so beaten up. And I think that's kind of hilarious, and more games should have something like that. Experience in gaining levels is simple. You level up when your game master says so. And it's usually, on a mission basis or an adventure basis. And that's fine. I usually do games like that anyway, but it does lack the incentivization that XP has, right? If you give certain tasks an XP reward, then you can drive players to do certain kinds of things rather than others. And that's not really present here. But again, all of these rules are very modular, so you could easily take things in and out with no problem. It contains random encounters, always important for a dungeon crawler, and creature reactions to give those encounters a lot of variety. Monsters won't just attack, they'll do a bunch of different things. It has usage dice. Usage dice is another popular mechanic I've seen in old school games. This game, the Black Hack, is kind of like a compilation of a bunch of interesting rules I've seen around the OSR blogosphere, all kind of condensed into one thing. So if you're not up on OSR games, this is a good place to start, actually. Usage dice. How that works is it's a way of abstracting using up something like ammunition or rations. And you start with a certain size die, and whenever you use it, you roll the die, and if it comes up a 1 or a 2, you move down to the next size die. So your stuff depletes, but it doesn't deplete at a predictable rate. It adds a little bit of tension, I think, to the situation, and it's a little bit of push your luck, right? So you're not quite sure when your stuff is going to run out. Looking at the classes, it has the 4 standard classes: Warrior, Thief, Cleric, and Conjurer. Conjurer being just another word for wizard. Wizards are the weakest, Warriors are the toughest. Warriors gain a little bit of hit points when they're fighting. They can make 1 attack per level. That's a crazy powerful ability. I'm not so sure about that. And it has this rule. When you fail a dodge, when you actually get hit by some damage, right? If you're holding a shield, you can shatter the shield and you negate all of the damage. That's called Shields Shall Be Splintered. It's actually a very popular old school rule made by the blogger Trollsmith. And it's one of the most popular old school rules. I've seen it everywhere. It's nice to see it actually in a published thing. Thieves get advantage to doing thiefy stuff. Clerics can, they can banish nearby zombies, right, like you'd expect. And they can do divine spell casting. Wizards are good at resisting magic, and they get arcane spell casting. Pretty straightforward. Spellcasting is interesting. Again, it's roll under. So we want to cast a spell, you have to roll adding the spell level. So the higher spells are harder to cast. Well, that's not quite right. Spells always work, but if you fail the spellcasting roll, then you lose a spell slot. So that means that in general, wizards and clerics are going to have more flexibility in what spells they cast. And they're typically going to be able to cast more spells than in other games. Because casting a spell is not always going to lose you a spell slot. There's a great list of divine and arcane spells here. It's done really well. It's very succinct. It balances perfectly, in my opinion, the amount of information you want on a spell. Enough so that it's clear what they do, but it's not so complete that there isn't room for interpretation, which is just how I like spells. A short bestiary of typical monsters with hit dice and a special ability that sets them apart. And we have a character sheet here. Character sheet is okay. Again, nice design, nice typography, but there's some issues with it that I'm not crazy about. For example, hit dice and hit points have a huge space here. But attack damage is, I'm not quite sure what that's for. And there's no room for spells. There's different spell levels here, but no space to write all the spells that you know in a spell book. This backpack is a really nice idea graphically, but it must be very hard to write the actual equipment in each of those spaces because they're just very small. I feel like this could have been designed a little better. An example of play in the very back, which does a great job in covering most of the basic mechanics of the game. All in all, very well written. Let's look at a couple of the other things that came with this when I got my whole pack. So for one thing, I got this DM screen. has the same sort of symbol here. It's just a fold out like this. And I don't normally play with a DM screen, but it's nice to get it anyway. With a book this skinny, I'm not sure it's necessary, but I am glad to see that it doesn't use too much stuff that's already in the book. It just has a couple of the tables that you're typically going to use, so you don't have to reference it by opening up the book. And over here, it has 4 really fun tables that help you improvise during the game. Odd effects, NPC concepts, why something's interesting, and strange complications. Great idea. In fact, my personal preference is to have a GM screen be the entire page. All 3 pages would be just filled with these sorts of tables. That would be my ideal. But these are useful too. They would speed up the game a little bit, I think. Also, we have a short adventure called The Queer and Deadly Town of Sorrow set. And this is a great example of how to do a sandbox type adventure. Rather than have everything planned out for you, rather than be a script that you have to follow, it has generators that generate a new town, a new plot every time. There's a great encounter generator here. It creates, got random monsters, and it tells you what they're doing and what they're after, special things about the creatures. So every time you come across something, there's going to be a twist to it. You got a list of very well written, very punchy townsfolk descriptions. Not a square inch is wasted. Around the edge, something's taken up. You got names here, you got taverns here, you got possible quests here. So everything is useful. On the back, you got a random dice drop table. You can drop some D6s here and get a random town. And you can figure out where the roads are. It tells you what's down all the streets. So just with these 2 pages, you can generate a whole adventure that could take several sessions possibly, which is a great use of space and is so much more compact and useful than these giant, thick source books that get put out officially. And I don't think are as useful, frankly. We also got a couple extra character sheets, but nothing you couldn't really just print out on your own, I don't think. So, all in all, should you get this book, The Black Hack? It depends on what you're looking for. It's not for those who like character builds or stat blocks or really linearly structured play. The game's going to fight you on that front if you play it as written. However, it's a really decent entry point into old school style of play if you're curious about that. And you should probably pick it up if so. After all, it's only $2 on RPG now, which is a great deal. And there's a huge amount of additional material being written for it by other old school writers, and that you can get really cheaply, and it'll help you modify your game to do whatever you want. I saw this one I'm really interested in. It's a supplement called Black Star's Rise, and it's going to take the Black Hack rules and port them into a futuristic Lovecraftian setting. So sci-fi Lovecraft. I saw some preliminary art for it, and it looks fantastic, so really hope that comes out soon. But there's plenty of other supplements that cover almost anything else that you would want. And again, all for really cheap in PDF form. You can also get it in hard copy on the Square Hex store, which is based in the UK. I'll put links in the description. I'll also put links to the Google Plus community. That's quite strong now and has been building new stuff for this regularly. Lots of great discussions happening. Well, that's it. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more RPG reviews. And let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about the Black Hack or other old school games in general. Also, I appreciate any referrals that you have to other old school rule sets that you enjoy. Thanks for watching.